Chapter 23. The hot weather of July had crept upon them unawares, and the atmosphere of the flat vale hung heavy as an opiate over the dairy folk, the cows, and the trees. Hot steaming rains fell frequently, making the grass where the cows fed yet more rank, and hindering the late haymaking in the other meads. It was Sunday morning. The milking was done. The outdoor milkers had gone home. Tess and the other three were dressing themselves rapidly, the whole bevy having agreed to go together to Mellstock Church, which lay some 3 or 4 miles distant from the dairy house. She had now been 2 or 3 months at Talbothays, and this was her first excursion. All the preceding afternoon and night heavy thunderstorms had hissed down upon the meads and washed some of the hay into the river. But this morning the sun shone out all the more brilliantly for the deluge, and the air was balmy and clear. The crooked lane leading from their own parish to Mellstock ran along the lowest levels in a portion of its length, and when the girls reached the most depressed spot, they found that the result of the rain had been to flood the lane overshoe to a distance of some 50 yards. This would have been no serious hindrance on a weekday. They would have clicked through it in their high pattens and boots quite unconcerned. But on this day of vanity, this sun's day, when flesh went forward to coquet with flesh, while hypocritically affecting business with spiritual things, on this occasion, for wearing their white stockings and thin shoes, and their pink, white, and lilac gowns, on which every mud spot would be visible, the pool was an awkward impediment. They could hear the church bell calling, as yet nearly a mile off. "Who would have expected such a rise in the river in summer-time?" said Marian from the top of the roadside bank on which they had climbed, and were maintaining a precarious footing in the hope of creeping along its slope till they were past the pool. "We can't get there anyhow without walking right through it, or else going round the turnpike way, and that would make us very late," said Retty, pausing hopelessly. "And I do colour up so hot walking into church late and all the people staring round," said Marian, "that I hardly cool down again till we get into the That It May Please These." While they stood clinging to the bank they heard a splashing round the bend of the road, and presently appeared Angel Clare advancing along the lane toward them through the water. 4 hearts gave a big throb simultaneously. His aspect was probably as un-Sabbatarian a one as a dogmatic parson's son often presented, his attire being his dairy clothes, his long wading boots, a cabbage leaf inside his hat to cool his head down, with a thistle spud to finish him off. "He's not going to church," said Marian. "No, I wish he was," murmured Tess. Angel, in fact, rightly or wrongly, to adopt the safe phrase of evasive controversialists, preferred sermons in stones to sermons in churches and chapels on fine summer days. This morning, however, he had gone out to see if the damage to the hay by the flood was considerable or not. On his walk he observed the girls from a long distance, though they had been so occupied with their difficulties of passage as not to notice him. He knew that the water had risen at that spot, and that it would soon quite check their progress. So he had hastened on, with a dim idea of how he could help, one of them in particular. The rosy-cheeked, bright-eyed quartet looked so charming in their light summer attire, clinging to the roadside bank like pigeons on a roof slope, that he stopped a moment to regard them before coming close. Their gauzy skirts had brushed up from the grass innumerable flies and butterflies, which, unable to escape, remained caged in the transparent tissue as in an aviary. Angel's eyes at last fell upon Tess, the hindmost of the 4. She, being full of suppressed laughter at their dilemma, could not help meeting his glance radiantly. He came beneath them in the water, which did not rise over his long boots, and stood looking at the entrapped flies and butterflies. "Are you trying to get to church?" he said to Marian, who was in front, including the next two in his remark, but avoiding Tess. "Yes, sir, and it is getting late, and my colour do come up so." "I'll carry you through the pool, every gill of you." The whole four flushed as if one heart beat through them. "I think you can't, sir," said Marian. "It's the only way for you to get past. Stand still. Nonsense, you're not too heavy. I'll carry you all four together. Now, Marian, attend," he continued, "and put your arms round my shoulders. So. Now, hold on. That's well done." Marian had lowered herself upon his arm and shoulder as directed, and Angel strode off with her, his slim figure, as viewed from behind, looking like the mere stem to a great nosegay suggested by hers. They disappeared round the curve of the road, and only his sousing footsteps and the top ribbon of Marian's bonnet told where they were. In a few minutes he reappeared. Izz Hewitt was the next in order upon the bank. "Here he comes," she murmured, and they could hear that her lips were dry with emotion. "And I have to put my arms round his neck and look into his face as Marian did." "There's nothing in that," said Tess quickly. "There is a time for everything," continued Izz, unheeding. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. The first is now going to be mine." "Fie, it is Scripture, Izz." "Yes," said Izz. "I always a ear at church for pretty verses." Angel Clare, to whom 3/4 of this performance was a commonplace act of kindness, now approached Izz. She quietly and dreamily lowered herself into his arms, and Angel methodically marched off with her. When he was heard returning for the third time, Retty's throbbing heart could be almost seen to shake her. He went up to the red-haired girl, and while he was seizing her, he glanced at Tess. His lips could not have pronounced more plainly, "It will soon be you and I." Her comprehension appeared in her face. She could not help it. There was an understanding between them. Poor little Retty, though by far the lightest weight, was the most troublesome of Clare's burdens. Marian had been like a sack of meal, a dead weight of plumpness under which he had literally staggered. Izz had ridden sensibly and calmly. Retty was a bunch of hysterics. However, he got through with the disquieted creature, deposited her, and returned. Tess could see over the hedge the distant three in a group, standing as he had placed them on the next rising ground. It was now her turn. She was embarrassed to discover that excitement at the proximity of Mr. Clare's breath and eyes, which she had contemned in her companions, was intensified in herself, and as if fearful of betraying her secret, she paltered with him at the last moment.